Yeah, hey, this shit easy, nigga. Hey, all I'm talking about, nigga, I'm still out here trying to get it.
Contender Regime Boxing checking back in with y'all, man. What's happening? So, listening to Gary Russell Jr. on the PBC podcast on YouTube earlier this morning. I believe it dropped yesterday. And just listening to it, man, you know, it's good to hear from the brother Gary Russell Jr. I'm a huge fan. I love his game, love his skill. I love his mentality, at least what seems to be his mentality when he talks. You know, Gary Russell Jr. a good talker, man, and he'll make you, he'll make you think that he really a killer, he really a dog. And when he get in the ring, you know, he definitely do his thing. So I'm a huge fan of Gary Russell Jr. You know, but listening to him, I can't help but get this feeling of like redundancy or like deja vu. Like I seen this before, I heard this before. And it just stems from in the last 7 years, he's only fought 5 times. He hasn't fought more than 1 time in a single year since 2014. That's crazy to me, considering how skilled and just how elite of a fighter Gary Russell Jr. is when he's actually active. And to think that we've only seen this guy 5 times in the last 7 years, and to think that he hasn't fought more than once in a single year 7 years ago, since 2014. And, you know, he's talking about, I would like to fight Tank Davis. I'm still interested in Leo Santa Cruz, even though that fight probably won't have the same steam on it that it had previously. He seems, like I said, this is nothing new that we haven't heard from Gary Russell Jr. over the past few years about his him being interested in fighting the guys that we want to see him fight. But for whatever reason, these fights not happening. And I understand in boxing that it's a business. You got high risk, low reward guys. You have fighters in situations where they're signed to the quote unquote wrong side of the street, where they can't get big name fighters that are signed with different promotional outfits and networks, being managed by different advisors and managers. You see those type of situations all the time. And even though I don't like those situations either, you can understand them somewhat. But with Gary Russell Jr., I'm not even understanding like why he's not even active. Why he's not fighting anybody. Yeah, he's been one of the longest reigning champions. I think he is. He might be the longest reigning WBC champion in boxing right now. If I'm wrong, y'all let me know. But I know he is one of the longest reigning champions, and I'm not trying to like discredit him or shit on that. But one of the reasons why, I mean, maybe if he fought 2 or 3 times a year, he would still be a champion right now. Probably a multi-divisional champion. But the fact that he only fights once a year versus the mandatory, that's really not enough for me. Now I know the mandatory is not always the next best guy, but at least in that particular division and that particular sanctioning body, you're fighting the number 1 contender. So I get it. That's dope and that's good. But it's mind-boggling to me how Gary Russell Jr. is this good of a fighter. He's 33 years old. And in the last 7 years, he's only fought 5 times. I mean, bro, I'm still trying to wrap my head around this shit. I want to see Gary Russell versus Tank. I want to see Gary Russell versus Devin Haney. I don't give a damn. I'll watch him versus any of these young dudes. At this point, I'll watch Gary Russell versus anybody, bro. I just want to see this dude in the ring. I know people be like, well, if you fighting guys that are lesser than you, then you ain't going to get up for the fight. I understand that, bruh. But at the same time, dog, if you can't get the fights that you want, man, you need to be in a ring just knocking motherfuckers' heads off. I'm talking about going crazy. Anybody that'll sign a contract, get them in a ring and beat their ass. Pick up a paycheck and keep your name out there. You know, keep your name out there. Make these motherfuckers acknowledge you. Make every time Tank Davis have an interview, they need to ask him about Gary Russell Jr. Every time Devin Haney have an interview, they need to ask him about Gary Russell Jr. Every time Teofimo Lopez, Oscar Valdez, Miguel Burchell, anybody between 130 and 135, anytime they have an interview, they need to be asking about Gary Russell Jr. That's the type of energy Gary Russell need to be putting out. You know what I'm saying? But you can't do that if you're not active. If you fight now look at Terrence Crawford. Terrence Crawford there's some information that came out about Terrence Crawford possibly fighting Zepeda, a 140-pounder, on October 22nd, which is supposed to be the last fight of this current top-ranked contract that he's under right now. You know what I'm saying? Contract ends in October, supposedly. So, I mean, people asking about Terrence Crawford. When they talk to Errol Spence, they asking Errol Spence about Terrence Crawford. When they talk to Keith Thurman, they asking Keith Thurman about Terrence Crawford. When they talk to Sean Porter, they asking Sean Porter about Terrence Crawford. He might not be fighting the guys that we want him to fight, but he's active. He fighting somebody, you know what I'm saying? He fighting a motherfucker that's breathing. You know what I'm saying? You go out there, you whoop their ass. The worst thing you can do is not fight anybody. The worst thing for a boxer, in my opinion, is inactivity. That's the worst thing. Guys that's out the ring too long. I don't give a damn how much you training, bruh. If you're not getting ready for a fight, if you're not going through those training camps, if you're not going through the process of the press conferences and having a fight and just having that energy, having that itch to get in the ring and compete under the lights when it all matters, I think that takes away a lot. That takes away some of the edge off you, and that take away from your game. You know what I'm saying? So when you do get in the ring and you have these big fights, bro, you're not even vibrating on that type of level. You know what I'm saying? You're not even on that frequency that you need to be on because you've been out the ring so long. You know what I'm saying? I'd rather the fighter fight C- and C level guys consistently than to not fight nobody. You know what I'm saying? I just want to see Gary Russell Jr. in the ring, bro. And listening to these interviews, like I said, it's good to hear from the brother. And I respect Gary Russell Jr. Think he's a great fighter. I think he's extremely skilled. Got the tutelage, the pedigree, come from a boxing and fighting family. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to his brother, Gary Antoine Russell, who I think is going to be major in the sport of boxing. But it's like listening to these interviews, man, every time I hear Gary Russell Jr. talk, it's very entertaining. He's definitely a talker. And he'll get you riled up and make you think, oh, shit, yeah. You know, Gary Russell, he finna go kill something. You know what I'm saying? But it's the same shit. Like, he don't never fight nobody. You know what I'm saying? So, y'all let me know what y'all think down in the comments, man. This is the curious case of Gary Russell Jr. Part 2. Y'all, if y'all ain't seen the first one, I dropped the first one, you know what I'm saying, a little while ago. The curious case of Gary Russell Jr., man. I'm still out on the search with my little magnifying glass. I'm trying to find clues. I'm trying to find out what's going on. Y'all let me know what y'all think down in the comments, man. Contender Regime Boxing. I'll holler at y'all boys, man.